Now, late last year, you may remember this because we did discuss it, the government tasked the Ministry of Health with consulting the public on whether additional safety measures or regulations should be put in place for puberty blockers. The consultation sought feedback on the need for additional safety measures, potential restrictions on prescribing, and the impacts of such measures. Now, that consultation period closed yesterday at 5 p.m. Now, the Women's Rights Party has criticised the Ministry of Health's consultation, labelling it inadequate and overdue. They've also expressed concern over the lack of current safety protocols, emphasising that puberty blockers are not licensed for treating gender dysphoria, and their safety and effectiveness for this use have not been thoroughly assessed. The Women's Rights Party co-founder and good friend of the show is Jill Ovens, and she joins me now. Jill, a very good afternoon.
Well, good afternoon to you too, and welcome back.
Oh, thanks, Jill, and happy belated New Year. You're our first interview of the year, so that's brilliant. Nice way to start.
Yeah. What an honour.
What an honour. Jill, walk us through some of the concerns with the Ministry of Health's consultation, and let's first look at why you're calling it inadequate.
So, first of all, they've been really pathetic in showing any leadership. It's normal for health authorities in the Western world, with the exception of the US, to show leadership in terms of the use of medications for particular purposes. And it's been known since 2022, when the CAS interim review came out, that there is not any decent evidence that these particular hormones are safe and effective for this particular use. They are used in other contexts, such as endometriosis and fibroids and for children with precocious puberty, and that's all licensed, but they're not licensed for this use. And so they said, all right, well, we're going to do a review, but nothing came out till last September, when they said, we better have another look at it because of the final CAS review, which came out in April last year, nearly a year ago. That was an extensive review over 4 years of thousands of pieces of research, and found very few that were strong in terms of their methodology, and the evidence was just not there. So what's real? And so then, finally they said, they were pushed by the government. So, it's not really the role of politicians to get involved in what should be evidence-based. But because this has become an issue about the transgender people have tried to make it an issue of human rights, which it isn't, it ended up going into the political sphere. So what do? They consult, but they say they really want to hear from the people that are giving out doing the prescribing, and the people that are using the medication. They particularly want to hear from them, not really the public at large. But
yeah, that's interesting, Jill, for the listeners. The ministry did invite input from groups that support puberty blockers. Having said that, though, and I know what you're saying, it feels like the health system is being influenced by a vocal minority. But if you're asking for consultation, isn't it important to have both sides?
Well, that's exactly, and that's why we spent some quite considerable time looking into the issue and getting feedback from our members about it. And we're aware that other groups have also made significant submissions, such as Speak Up for Women and Resist Gender Education. And so they will get some, but it will be overwhelmingly because groups like Inside Out have been busy lobbying and organising for people to put in submissions and so on. But at the end of the day, the decision should be made on, is it safe for our children to be using these hormones, which are, colloquially called puberty blockers, and they do what they say they do. They actually stop them going into puberty.
Yes.
So, I don't know whether an afternoon show is the place to mention that the little boys' penises don't develop, the little girls' hips don't develop, so they won't be able to birth babies if they, change their mind, which particularly in the case of girls, they do. So they do have impacts, and they impact on their brain development. It's a really important part of us maturing from children into adulthood.
Yeah. Oh no, this is definitely the show we can talk about it, Jill. So that's because I've read what the Ministry of Health and some doctors have put out, and okay, maybe not so much them, but there's been independent doctors that have tried to say that, once you go off the puberty blockers, it all comes back, everything's tickety-boo and you go back to, and you're saying it does it depend on how long you're on them?
Well, the fact of the matter is that the research shows that most of them move on to cross-sex hormones.
Oh,
and
yeah,
that's where the real damage is done in terms of irreversibility.
Yeah.
So they do use them for precocious puberty, and they go on them for a short period of time to delay them getting their periods. Usually is the problem until they're a little bit older, and then they stop. But
so precocious puberty, just to explain, is that when you do go through puberty quite young, younger than normal?
Yeah.
So a young girl having a period at, say, 8 or something.
8, yes.
Yeah. Jill,
yes,
you've spoken about an holistic approach to addressing gender distress. What steps would you like to see health professionals take in this direction?
Yeah, so one of the things people talk about is watching and waiting. So rather than affirming their gender, the clinicians will look at the whole of the person's problems, issues that they're bringing.
Yep.
So they may have autism spectrum disorders, they may have eating disorders, body dysmorphia, particularly with the young adolescent girls. So, you've got different cohorts, and one of the problems is that when they first started using puberty blockers for this purpose in Holland, it was with a tiny group of, young boys who were displaying atypical behaviour in terms of, what we would regard as sex stereotypes. So, and that does tend to persist into adulthood, and they often become gay or bisexual. But what they did is, and it has been linked to the social influences and Tumblr and TikTok and so on, because the timing is so more than coincidental. So from 2012, you get this rapid increase of girls who suddenly get gender dysphoria, and often in patterns like several girls in the same classroom.
Right.
And there's never been any clinical protocols around using them for that purpose. So, they don't fit the Dutch protocols, which were not designed for these girls in adolescence.